How are you, Steve
I am
Stine,
good.
Professor, Doctor Extraordinaire?
I'm so happy to be
Nice.
here.
Me too. So, guys, thank you for being here with us today. Steve and I are always super excited when you show up and hang out with us for a little bit to learn some guitar, some guitar coolness. Today, we're doing a creative soloing workshop for you. And we're going to be talking about all things soloing and how to make your solos more creative, how to help your solos not sound like a scale, how to use your entire fretboard, how to use all different types of articulation and techniques to make your solos more creative and more musical. That's the whole goal of the Creative Soloing Workshop. So if you want to learn that, stay with us. If you want to learn it even faster, you can check out Steve's new course. It's called Creative Soloing, and it's available at guitarzoom.com. Take it away, sir. How are you?
I am good, buddy. How are you?
Good, man.
Good.
This is a super exciting workshop. Oh, and by the way, before we get to 100% started, I want to let everybody know, please put your comments in the box there, wherever you're watching this. Most folks on YouTube, could be Facebook, a lot of other places. Put your comments in there. Steve and I will try to answer them as we go here. Also, if you're not subscribed, you want to go ahead and do that. You'll get notified. Make sure you turn on the notification button. You'll get notified of all of the creative workshop sessions that we're going to be doing for you. Also, we will compile all these in a nice playlist for you, and they'll be available for you on the channel. So you can go there. If you missed any previous ones, if you can't make it to the next one at this specific time, then they'll be there for you in the playlist. So make sure you subscribe and hit the notify button if you would like to be notified next time. Cool? All right. Sorry to interrupt you, buddy. Go ahead.
No worries. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start off this whole thing with is a technique that I call meandering. And the reason is if you think about, as guitar players, when we learn scales, we learn what we learn is great. But the downside to doing what we do is that we practice the way our instructor or the way the video tells us, and so we're actually doing the right thing, but we're not being creative. So if you think about it this way, like if I was to take a scale, let's say I was just going to take G minor pentatonic, right? So I take G minor pentatonic, and I'm taught to practice going up and down that scale, right? And I might do some other exercises or whatever. So I'm training myself to visualize that and to play that scale, but I really am training myself to play it straight up and down. And that's not wrong. It's just it's not training me to do anything creative with it. Okay? So, and it doesn't matter whether you're playing pentatonic or diatonic or whatever it is you might be doing. If you just practice going up and down all the time, of course, you're creating muscle memory and brain memory, and this is what you're doing. So what meandering does is it tries to break you out of that by forcing your brain to constantly sort of juxtapose the ideas that you've got. So what I do, and now again, this is going to take a little practice on your part, and of course we go into it more detail in the course, but basically if you set a metronome at a certain tempo, and you're going to have to work out what tempo is going to work best for you, but if you set the metronome at a certain tempo, the goal of meandering is you have to continue moving your fingers aimlessly around inside that scale position. You cannot stop. If you stop, especially if you continue stopping, like if you get started again and then your brain freezes, the tempo's too fast. And I'll show you what meandering is in a second, and then you can try it and see what I mean. But oftentimes one of the number one problems for guitar players is that we try and do everything too fast. Everything's always done too fast. And the trick of this is to train your fingers to go anywhere at any time inside that scale that you're studying without having to stop. So if you find yourself stopping over and over and over, tell yourself, I got to slow this down and try it again. So what I've got is I've got a metronome set at 100 beats per minute. Let me start that for you just to hear, so you can hear it. Okay, now I wouldn't be playing at this speed. I'd be playing at twice that speed. So it's set at 100. Those would be quarter notes. I would be playing what we call eighth notes. Now again, you have to figure it out for yourself, but I always like eighth notes because it forces you to challenge a bit because you have to feel the beat in between each one of those quarter notes. So I'm thinking bum, 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 bum. So when the metronome starts, what I want to do is take, and I'm just going to use G minor pentatonic as my example. And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and go up and down and in and out and jump and back and forth. And if I do my brain does get stuck, it freezes, it's okay to stay on the note that you're on, just keep picking until you can get your brain back. And if you get stuck, just the goal is try to continue going. Now again, if you get stuck constantly, guess what? Speed's too fast. You got to slow it down a little bit. So watch what happens when I start the metronome. Now I got to keep going to this. And if you don't have a metronome, I'm literally just on Google and I typed in the word metronome and you get a metronome. So
amazing world we live in.
Yeah. So here we go. Now, it's aimless. It doesn't have a musical direction, that sort of thing. Again, there's no chords underneath me. All I'm trying to do is train my body, train my mind, train my fingers to be able to move around at will to different places. So instead of going... what I'm forcing myself to do is do some forward stuff, backward stuff, but then also in and out stuff. Jump over things. Okay? So it's not about all these other things you think about. You know, right now we're not focusing on trying to land on the right note at the right time. It's not any of those things. You're just training yourself to move with confidence and control freely through the position that you're in at a speed that you can physically do this at. If you keep trying it and you keep failing, again, I'm not being offensive, but don't try and be a superhero. Lower down the tempo, find the speed that works for you. Lying to yourself never does you any good. It's just eventually it'll catch up to you. So the goal is you got to really figure out what that is. I don't care if you set the metronome at 60 beats per minute. It doesn't matter. It's just get on the board and then start working through it. Now, oftentimes when you do this, you're going to start seeing some issues kind of raise to the surface, right? You'll find out what tempo works for you. You'll find out whether you really do know that position that you've been working on or not, right? Because now you're not just playing it by route, right? You're actually just trying to move around and make whatever you want up. And what oftentimes comes out of this practice is that you start coming up with new, we can call them licks, we can call them patterns, but you start coming up with new creative ideas of being able to move from one place to another, or even create little motions of repetition. Because if you become aware of something and you go, hey, I kind of like that, it's okay to repeat it. It's okay to do whatever you want. The goal is just, number one, don't stop. And number two, don't just play it all the way up and all the way down. You can't just sit and play scales up and down like that.
Very cool technique.
Yeah, it's really effective.
And you call this meandering.
Yeah, because basically what you're trying to do is turn off your thinking brain. And you're just going into what we would call, for lack of a better term, the improvisatory side of your brain, where you're just allowing things to happen. Now, in a real improvisation, of course, there is thought process and there is direction and there is all these other things would happen, but they stack on top of what you're doing right now. Because in order to be able to take in I've got to be comfortable with moving around my fretboard. My fingers have got to know where they're going. So if you think about meandering, what it does is it teaches me to do things that are a bit more unorthodox, but comfortably and slowly. Again, I hate to make everything about speed because it always winds up going that way. And then even when I play, sometimes I play things that are, I don't mean to play everything a little faster, but That's the trick. You got to be comfortable. It can't just be here's a lick, and here's a lick, and here's a lick. If you play that way, the problem is you run out of ideas really quick. And the second thing is everything tends to sound the same. Either your phrasing is the same or the length of the patterns that you're playing are the same. So, and we'll get into that. We've got Dan and I are going to be doing a number of workshops here to help you with this. But anyway, that's a really great place to start. Is just set your metronome. Preferably, if you can, set it so whatever it's clicking at, you're going to go twice that fast. Bum, 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 bum. Even if you set it here. Dun, 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 right? Just get on the board. That's the trick. And start learning. Okay?
Super cool. So I'm curious, Steve, everything you were doing there was like in that first position pentatonic.
Yep.
Right. I'm guessing that if people feel comfortable, with like the first, second, third positions, they can start adding those.
Well, that's the next step is, and again, I'm going to remind you, don't move too fast. If you're failing, even if you've convinced yourself that and I'm not saying you do or don't, I'm just saying be honest with yourself when you practice. That's how you really make progress, is understanding what you can and can't do. It's when you wake up every day pretending like you can do something you can't, it's really hard to make progress. So once you've established, like, let's say that first position, right? You could go into the second position and do exactly the same thing. Whatever the second position means to you, whether it's pentatonic, whether it's diatonic, a particular scale that you're working on, whatever it is that you're doing. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't practice your scales up and down. That's perfectly fine. It's just a different technique and it's a different purpose. So when you're doing that, your metronome more than likely will be higher, quite a bit higher probably than what you're doing when you're meandering. They're two separate things that you could practice. Okay? Mm-hmm. So if I was to move to the second position, for instance, I could do the same thing in that second position. And the great thing is, again, I have so many students that I always call all or nothing. Humans tend to be all or nothing. Either we don't do anything or we just go crazy until we drive ourselves crazy trying to do everything. So the trick with this is maybe you only really know two positions. You've been learning four positions, but you really, really know two positions. Okay? Well, if the time came for you to actually jam with other musicians in a band or a jam or performance or something like that, you're better off knowing two positions really well that you can really control than you are sort of kind of maybe knowing four positions, but you're not really sure. And then you hit wrong notes and then you get freaked out and, the whole, the vibe changes. Mm-hmm. You're always better off going with what you know. So if you knew, let's say you knew the first position of G minor pentatonic and the second position really well, and you were practicing this, here's the really wonderful thing then is you start learning to maneuver back and forth with meandering as well. Now, as you start doing this, you might realize, this opens up another section, as you're shifting, which is one really big thing that I wanted to get across in creative soloing, is it's not just the practice within positions, and we'll get into this more as the workshops continue, but you might slide. You might do a hammer-on or a pull-off. And that's okay. As a matter of fact, you want to become aware of that because that's the natural motion for you to be able to move. Like a lot of times when I get students that will be learning a song and they'll go, well, so-and-so picked all of this, or so-and-so, hammer on or pulled off these parts, but it's uncomfortable for me. Well, you have two choices at that point. Either you go that direction to try and learn that technique, which is great, or you cultivate it in the way that it feels most comfortable to you to develop your own approach to playing guitar. I always go back to a story that George Lynch had told where George Lynch had already been famous with Dokken. George Lynch, the iconic George Lynch, at least in my eyes. And then all these other players like Malmsteen and stuff were all becoming really big, this whole movement of shredder players, the shrapnel players, Tony McAlpine and all this stuff. So he went back and started trying to learn how to pick everything, because that's what he thought they were all doing, was picking everything. So he started going back, and he was like so frustrated because he couldn't do it. And then one day it occurred to him that he's George Lynch, and just be George Lynch. And I always thought that was just the coolest thing ever, because even players like that get caught up in this whole thing. And so instead of trying to become something he isn't, he realized he should just be himself. So I just always really try and encourage that, because if you find there's a way that works for you to move around the fretboard, and you become aware of that, whether it's a slide or a hammer-on or pull-off or a certain finger that moves a certain way, now all of a sudden you become more aware of the way that you play or a way that you're picking. And again, I'm throwing a lot at you, and we'll talk about this more as our workshop progresses, and certainly in the creative soloing course. But those are the things you want to come to light. That's kind of the secondary win of this meandering aspect when you start putting positions together. You'll experience, no doubt you'll experience it in a single position, but it really comes to light as you start moving between positions.
Awesome. Guys, if you want to learn creative soloing, I would encourage you to subscribe to this channel and make sure that you hit the notify button so that we can send you a notice whenever we're going to be doing some new live workshops. Steve and I have several of these planned for you. Today we talked about meandering. We talked about using a metronome. We talked about techniques like hammer-ons, pull-offs, sliding. We touched on it, on how to kind of connect these scale patterns together. We're going to be doing some more of these creative soloing workshops for you. We hope that you'll join us. Thank you so much for showing up today. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you'd like to get the course, Steve's new course, it's called Creative Soloing. Goes through all of this stuff, and I'm telling you, we just scratched the surface on everything that you'll get in the course. Today, meandering is just one of these many concepts that Steve talks about in the course. And for me, Steve, you get to kind of a point in your playing where you're not trying to learn everything. You're just trying to learn like one thing well. And so when I think about people that may be on the fence about, investing in this course, first of all, it's very affordable. But secondly, you don't have to learn everything in the course. You could just learn like one thing really, really well that completely changes your playing. Do you agree with that? Oh,
totally. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the all or nothing thing that I was talking about before is the same thing with, if you're like me as a guitar player. Again, guitar playing is what I know. There's a million things I wish I knew how to do that I don't, but teaching guitar and playing guitar is what I do. And it's so easy to all of a sudden feel like you have 17 things that you need to work on all at the same time. And, studies have shown, especially in this digital age, that multitasking really is kind of a failing idea, because all you're really doing is giving very small percentages of your thought and your focus to a number of different things. And it's really hard to cultivate them to, again, a real usable, controllable, comfortable, professional, so to speak, level. And the goal is just to focus on small amounts of things. The biggest thing I learned a long time ago in learning from people that I wanted to learn from, guitar players that I wanted to learn from, was to take a little snippet of information and then turn off the video player, turn off the video, and just study that and learn how to do that. Like this meandering thing is huge. It's not just, again, a step to everything else and you should spend 5 minutes with it and then move on. It's really huge. When you watch players that you like just all over the fretboard doing things, it's because they have this control. They're able to see their fretboard in whatever situation they're in, right? Particular scale, particular key, whatever it is. And they see all of it laid out. Now, that can mean a lot of different things, but they do, right? Whether they see it sequentially or whether they see the whole thing at once, everybody's different that way. But the ability to maneuver through those positions or those strings or those patterns or those licks or however you want to look at it is really the trick. And that's what meandering is all about, is not only learning to see your fretboard, but becoming more intuitive of the way that you move when you play, the way that your pick moves, the way that you play legato, the string skipping that might happen for you, the sliding that happens, what strings you tend to slide on. Those are the kinds of things that people don't really think about because they're so busy thinking about a scale, right? There's a picture in their head. And again, that's not bad. We need that. But the more you start thinking about all the other things that are happening around you, the more you start learning about you and what you can do and what you need work on.
I love it. Guys, I just thought of something as Steve was talking. One challenge that all of us have as musicians, particularly guitar players, is how do you, there's only so much time in a day. So how do you carve out time for really focused practice? And what do you do during that time? Because it's really easy to grab your guitar and kind of noodle around. And Steve and I talked a lot about this in our, I guess combined, Steve, we probably have something like 50 years of playing experience,
at least.
right?
At least.
I've been playing since I was about 13 and you've been playing probably since the same. And so I don't even really want to crunch the numbers, but trust us, guys.
Well, that's the thing is understanding too, from that perspective, not everybody's looking for the same thing. If you're 50 and you start learning how to play guitar, people will say, well, am I too old to learn how to play? No, you're not too old to learn how to play. But do you have 10 hours a day to practice? Probably not. You probably have a job or two or three or a business or a family or, so it's, and I'm not being negative, I'm being very positive. It's learning how to use your time wisely and being realistic of what it is you're trying to do. You can play guitar. You don't have to play like, again, insert name here. You don't have to play like them. You have to play like you. So if you've got 15 minutes a day to practice, you got to figure out how that 15 minutes is best spent. If you've got 7 hours a day to practice, obviously there's other things that you could be working on than the person that only has 15 minutes a day. But if you're practicing 7 hours a day, chances are you're trying to make this your life. That's what I did, right? When I was a kid, you just gamble it all on the hopes that you're going to be able to do something with your guitar. Otherwise, why in, God's name would you be practicing 7 hours a day? You know what I mean? Where you can practice 15, 20 minutes a day and learn how to do all kinds of cool stuff and enjoy the ride, right?
That's right.
And somewhere in between there. So, my whole thing is I just want people to always be realistic with their practice and enjoy what they're doing. Don't constantly wake up mad because you're not as good as X, Y, or Z, right? Or you don't have as much time. I mean, to be honest with you, there was a time when I practiced so much that I sometimes wished I was doing other things. I was missing out on other things humans do, like interact, go to a party or whatever it might be, And so it's learning to use the time wisely. It's very important. I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but
no, it's a great tangent because I think it's something that's not discussed enough. We like to talk about techniques and scales and strumming patterns and all these things, but we actually sometimes forget to talk about how do you practice? Like, what do you do when you sit down? And Steve, actually, I don't know if you remember this, Steve, you actually created a course called the Ultimate Practice Routine. And it's available also, guys, for you at guitarzoom.com. And the Ultimate Practice Routine, that entire course is dedicated to teaching you how do you structure your practice time based on your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you just starting out? Are you trying to make this your career? And what's the most effective way to use the time that you're going to carve out each day We talk about things like having a practice space, like having a place that you actually go to in your home that's dedicated to your practice, having a specific day and time that you're like, okay, I know I can dedicate Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. to practice. And so I'm going to walk into that practice room or that practice space or my bedroom or wherever you keep your guitar and your setup, pick up your stuff and get going at that time. And then what do you actually do during that time? Do you have a warm up session? Do you have a stretching session? Like, what do you do? That course, I think, is something we probably don't talk enough about, is that ultimate practice routine, which teaches you how to do all that. So if that's something you're interested in, you need help with, that's available for you also. Guys, the new course is called Creative Soloing. Steve's new course. It's like all of his courses, awesome. Available at guitarzoom.com. Steve, thanks again, man. This has been an awesome session, and I'm looking forward to doing some more with you. Guys, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate all your comments. We appreciate all of your support, and we'll see you in the next Creative Soloing session. Thanks again for being here.
All right, everybody, take care.
Thanks.